Lucy Bisson, and I'm the chairperson of the Lewiston Planning Board, and I welcome all here this evening. And I call this meeting to order, and I would ask someone to do the roll call, please.
Sure, may I see your...
Sure, they're right
I
there.
apologize. Yes. It's just our names. I don't know why it's that challenging. Roger Dupree.
Here.
Joshua Najin.
Here.
Michael Marcotte.
Present.
Shanna Cox, myself here. Lucy Bisson.
Present.
Christine Kittredge is absent.
Absent, yes.
Amy Smith.
Here.
Lee Albert.
Here.
And Alex Pine.
Here.
Thank you.
And for staff, Shelley Norton, Deputy Director, City Planner, and David Hediger, the Director of Planning and Code Enforcement. And for the record, Lee will be a voting member this evening because Christine is not here. Bless you. And are there any adjustments to the agenda, Shelley?
There are not.
Okay, correspondence. David has been passing along some information, a memo and some ordinance pertaining to the zoning boundaries that I assume are related to items that are on our agenda for the evening.
Yes, so we passed out an opinion from Maine Municipal Association regarding a question staff had asked related to the restaurant definition, which is item number 3 on our agenda this evening. He also passed out some tweaks to the contract zone amendment for 855 Lisbon Street, which is the second item on tonight's agenda. And then you all also received a comment from the public, a member of the public that was emailed to you that was sent through administration. So those are the 3 items I have. And then I also just wanted to remind people that you have been invited to the what is
Wedgwood.
it? Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It's not a ribbon cutting.
Groundbreaking.
It's a groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking. Thank you for the Wedgwood development. So I sent out a second email about that today.
Thank you. And I will make a slight comment regarding the email that we received from the public. Thank you for sending this to the planning board's attention. Unfortunately, your requests deal with money, and the planning board does not deal with money. This would be more directed to the city council, who are the holders of the purse. So that is the only comment I have to make on that. And in that case, we are up to public hearings. And the first public hearing is Choice Dewitt LP on behalf of Lewiston-Auburn Area Housing Development Corporation has submitted an application to construct 2 buildings with 104 apartment units located at 40 and 60 Pine Street. And Shelley.
Okay. So this project is on 3 parcels located on Pine Street. It also fronts Park Street and Bates Street, I believe, yes. So it's essentially one block between...
Shelley, could you speak up because we can't hear you?
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
The wall started vibrating.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's the noise behind us that makes it difficult for us to hear you.
Okay, so the property is 3 parcels. It covers 1 city block from Park Street to Bates Street along Pine Street frontage. It is proposed to demolish the 2 existing buildings that are located there right now and build 2 new buildings in their place, approximately doubling the amount of building square footage. The proposal also would be consolidating those 3 lots down into 2 lots. And there is parking proposed in the rear. The new buildings are 5 stories high. There are The off-street parking requirements for the Centerville district are there are parking required for housing, but because of the proximity to the parking garage, that's not required that they would provide the parking on site. It can be at the parking garage. They have opted, though, to provide on-site parking for commercial uses. The first floor of both buildings have intent for commercial restaurant, retail type spaces. So they are intending to provide 42 parking spaces for the commercial tenants. So this is a project that the board saw a preview of a few months ago. One of the item that I kind of highlighted the most in the staff review here are a number of waiver requests that the applicant has made in their application. So I haven't detailed those. Those are detailed in their application. I believe the applicant also plans to go through those with you this evening, so I won't do that. But I will call to your attention that in the staff review, there are 2 sections of code that we've listed. The first is from Article 11, Section 24.5H, which is the Design District Overlay. So that Section H does have criteria for waiver requests A through E that should be considered when looking at the first group of requests. And then there is one waiver request that's related to a different section of code. That's Article 13, Section 8, which is the additional standards for certain residential developments, and specifically the amenity area. The board will recall a few months ago when staff and the board made changes to those requirements. We added a waiver opportunity for this, specifically for projects that were redevelopment or might not be able to demonstrate in the downtown the amount of amenity space required. So they are, you should look at those standards to see if they meet them when you're looking at that waiver request. There are a couple of staff comments that we weren't able to fully address before this evening. They're minor in nature. They're issues related to some of the stormwater and utility work. So we need to finalize a few things with Public Works and make sure they're satisfied with what the applicant is proposing related to their response to comments. Because the project is also not in the final stages yet, while they have plans for how they are meeting the financial requirements to build this project, they don't have committed financing yet. So proof of financial capacity is suggested as a condition of approval. So there are quite a few conditions of approval. Some of those are pretty standard. And we've recommended 2 motions. So I know in recent meetings there's been some lack of clarity with the staff review as to where the recommended conditions of approval would go when there's more than one action being suggested. In this case, the first motion that we're suggesting has to do with making a determination on those waiver requests. The second one would be both subdivision and development review approval, and that's where I would put any of the conditions above.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone on the board have any comments or questions for staff? Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Cox.
Which attachment is the best one to summarize all of the waiver requests?
So their application item I believe it is. Let me just verify, I think I'd mentioned that in here. Yeah, attachment I, waiver request, summarizes it. I also believe the applicant has a short PowerPoint that will go through those with you, but if you're looking for greater detail, then it is I.
So, follow the alphabet up here.
Yeah.
G. Yeah, it's after the plans. We can take these if you like.
I just went to N.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
you,
think
you,
it's
because it
inside
must be
the-
in that clip.
Thank you.
It's
Right
yeah.
where I would have
Packet.
looked. Great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, in that case, oh, you have a question? Okay, Michael?
I just noticed while looking for that attachment I, there's 2 attachment Gs. Does that make sense?
Or,
One attachment G says stormwater management plan, the other says erosion control plan.
That may just be an error in the applicant's materials that they can correct.
Because it does continue with H and I and so forth. I'm just thinking that maybe attachment, okay, I can see where the error is. I was going to suggest that some sort of category had both of them and they got separated, but it does make more sense that the numbering just got stuttered.
Yeah.
all right. Anyone else? Excuse me, anyone else have any questions for staff? Okay, if the applicant would like to come up and give us their presentation, please identify yourself, name, your company, and any other information that you'd like to share with us, you know.
You can pull up a
You can pull up the chair, and then when you want to speak, just make sure you speak into the microphone, so that, because this is being recorded and watched, it will be watched on YouTube at home at some point. It's being recorded, it's not being sent out live.
I'm Catherine Elliott. You all have seen me a handful of times before. I promise I won't be back too many more times. I work at Avesta
Oh,
Housing.
too bad.
We're a consultant to Lewiston Housing Authority for the choice developments, of which this is the second of the 2 phases that we're proposing. And
Hi, I'm Kara Biondi. I'm with Kaplan Thompson Architects.
And Sam LaBelle with Acorn Engineering, the civil engineer of record.
so we've got some images pulled up here just so that we can all be looking at the same thing. And our overall thought, how do I zoom in more on that? We'll talk a little bit about existing conditions and the site plan overall, and then have some images so we can talk about the exterior, and then we will go through each of the different waiver requests, kind of at a high level, and then to the extent there's questions or discussion or anything, we can certainly pause and talk about all of that in as much or as little detail as is desired. So I think everyone's pretty familiar with the site that we're talking about. As Shelley mentioned, it's 3 parcels, 40, 54, and 60 Pine. 40 Pine and 60 Pine are the addresses of the 2 existing buildings, both of which would be demoed. It's worth noting that the building at 40 Pine does require state permission to demo because of its age. It is more than 50 years old, and therefore it requires a state process because it could potentially be eligible to be listed on the historic registry. And then there's the vacant lot in the middle, which is 54 Pine, which you would have seen in some of your materials. Really, the only items to note there are some existing easements and things there for underground utilities. And this is the proposed site plan for what would go in place.
Sure, so I'll take it from here again. Sam LaBelle with Acorn Engineering. Really pleased to be here for this info project tonight. So from the site perspective, as you can see, Pine Street is kind of where we first started our efforts. We were fortunate enough to be able to catch the Kennedy Park renovations in time to be able to kind of have that synergy, that coordination with DPW and their designers. And so we were really able to not only wrap that and complement each other, but as you can see, almost get some symmetry and some real synergy in that the 2 sites talk to each other. So At the, you can kind of see that circular plaza at the bottom of the page. That would be the Kennedy Park. We've assumed our limit of work is to the center line of Pine Street. So everything highlighted to, plan north of that bottom line is under the responsibility of this applicant. And so we will be rebuilding a portion of the road. We'll be reclaiming some of those on-street parking spaces, brand new sidewalk, bike rack, street trees, really the whole shebang that way. And so we focused on Pine Street as being really kind of a placemaking and pedestrian experience. And so there are no curb cuts along Pine. This is kind of really, City Hall is just at the bottom left of the page. And so, this is the true downtown, and we wanted Pine Street to feel that way. So that's the design basis there. As you work your way to the left and the right, down Bates and Park Street, that's where we've kind of tried to hide the parking behind the building. Along Park Street, we've got your standard double-loaded corridor. The shorter bay of parking spaces you can see with the ADA, that would actually be covered. And then at the end of the drive aisle, we have an enclosed solid waste, so that would be screened along with the associated vegetation. On the right-hand side, we have another small curb cut and parking area. The kind of the secondary drive aisle you see closer to the building would be, we are proposing mountable curb there. And that would be restricted to, your box truck deliveries or, some of the larger vehicles that don't necessarily need to traverse through where the passenger vehicles are. On the flip side, the passenger vehicles would not, be permitted to use that curb cut, nor would they really want to, because it will have raised curb. So that kind of covers the vehicular areas. Moving on to the stormwater side of things, which we always get excited about in these infill projects, because it's a great opportunity to kind of improve upon the decades of just poor runoff and negative environmental effects. So number one is we were able to reduce impervious area. That's kind of always where we start. That's kind of goal number one. The second piece of it is that, again, in coordination with DPW, we are rerouting approximately 12,000 square feet of our runoff to a brand new dedicated storm drain that will be in Bates Street. And so continuing that conversation with Public Works as the two construction projects find their way. And then lastly, at the top right-hand corner, we have penciled in a proprietary high-flow rain garden. And so given the limited space, we weren't able to carve out, what a traditional soil filter or rain garden might require, but luckily there are innovative measures out there. And so working with some of those manufacturers, we've engineered not only detention, but water quality treatment. And so, kind of those three aspects together, we really see this as a win from an environmental and stormwater perspective. So that kind of covers the site layout and the stormwater piece. Rounding out the site design, we have put together a robust landscape design. Pat Carroll Associates, who's not here tonight, but he designed the landscape program. And of course, that's included in your packet, and we're happy to speak to that should anybody have any questions. I think that covers it from my side, so I'll hand it over to Kara to talk about the building.
Hi, everyone. Kara Biondi from Kaplan Thompson again. And so you've previously seen views exactly like this when we were here for a workshop, and I would just like to mention that it's really unchanged in regard to the bulk and the massing and how it's hitting the ground. And what we've really focused on is the refinement of a lot of details to add that texture and to harmonize with the historic context. And so we can go to the next slide and kind of zoom more in on the buildings. This is Building A, which is on Park and Pine Street. And we really focused on making those retail entrances their own. We recessed the 2 retail entrances that are flanking the building to create their own distinct space, and then the community space entered from the center of the building here. On the ground level, we're looking at using brickwork to really emphasize that enhanced detail when you're down at a human level, walking across, and hearkening back to the historic context. The window scheme is laid out with large plate glass windows with a decorative archtop detail above. And so in each of those arched panels, we'll have a decoration that also ties back to the historic context of Lewiston. On the upper levels, we focused on a lot of the roof detailing and creating a break between this large, long massing of the building. So we raised one portion of the roof, added more details on that one, and then created a calmer backdrop as we move along. We're using larger fiber cement panels, but leveraging the way that we're patterning them to also come back to historic details as well. And then each of the larger panels you're seeing in the upper level will be a Juliet balcony with a detailed rail in front of that, as well as a decorative panel below to start to break up the facade as well. And then here we have the plaza design, and I think what really helped us was a lot of the thoughtful comments from all of you at the last workshop, which really helped us to create a more inviting streetscape space here. And so we eliminated the trees on the left-hand side to provide more patio space for overflow from the retail. And so that can really be an activated space for people to come, sit, enjoy a meal. And then we created some barrier towards the back, but really opening out to Kennedy Park.
Did it swoop before? That curvy bit, was it curvy before?
It was curvy before, but it was a little harder to tell, I think. But we really wanted to take in that new sculpture.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so that is kind of an overview of the general building design approach, and then we do have a handful of waivers, so the best place for you to follow along is going to be that attachment I. And so there are 6 different items here, and we have some images to go along with each of them. So the first item is the glazing request that we have. The design district ordinance has, or overlay, has a different percentage of glazing required for ground floor commercial versus upper floor residential. And we would be asking for a reduction in both. And those percentages you can see in the request, that first request. What you're seeing up here and the images that we've shown all reflect that reduced percentage. So the intent is not to create a boring building, but to find something that finds that balance between the energy efficiency that we want, the cost management, and also the aesthetics of the exterior, so that we have windows in appropriate places that are appropriate sizes, so that all of that scaling fits together. So this, you can see, the colors are a little hard to discern, but the kind of peachier tones are the window numbers. So these are obviously windows. Then we've got the Juliet balconies, which we added both for additional interest and a nice amenity for residents, but it also does help increase that glazing percentage. And then on the ground floor, the larger rectangular windows, the arch top is not proposed as transparent glass. That would be a more detailed panel with a design on it. But the rest of the rectangular spaces all on that first floor would be glazing. And then it's essentially mimicked in building B as well. Some of the ground floor is a slightly different design because we have a different number of entrances, but that's the general impact there. Should I just go through each of them and then, or do people?
Do you guys want to stop and ask questions? Let's ask questions for each of the waivers, and then we can move on. So does anyone on the board have any questions regarding the glazing of the first floor and the upper floors? Ms. Cox?
May I just make a comment for staff largely? And we talked about this the last time you were in, but this is the second time a waiver request has come up for the glazing, which was on our radar anyway, but specifically this both times has referenced energy efficiency. Are there specific energy efficiency standards related to the amount of glazing and availability of glazed products that might guide us as we reconsider the glazing standards? And if you have them, send them along? Okay, that's it. It's just a like, hey, good information and night expertise. I'm sure you did some research. Would love to see it.
And one thing I would say to that is that it's not like there's a specific percentage that we'd be able to say, like, any building with this percentage is going to be great. It all has to do with how the different metrics of the building envelope and, you know, all of that stuff works together.
Sure.
So it's an answer with an asterisk.
50% seems really unachievable, though.
And also of note is that is challenging for a retail tenant. When you think about how how
Security,
customers, and how
merchandising.
customers go through the store and how designs work and, you know, that experience as well.
Right.
So balancing that external
wall space for
pedestrian
display, 'cause it's all
experience with the
windows.
internal
Right.
business management
Right.
piece.
Anyone else have any questions?
About the glazing.
Yeah, we're going to stick with just the glazing this time. Mr. Pine?
Just to piggyback on to Board Member Cox's comment to staff about glazing, I think it would be, I'm assuming we have information on like sort of existing buildings and if they would meet the state.
They do.
I mean, that's where it comes from. Yeah.
The survey of the
Yep.
of the information about existing buildings has largely come from this applicant at prior times.
Yep. So you know, being able to feed that into the process as well, really good. I wonder if, you know, 50% makes a lot of sense when you have a very short storefront, but on a newer building like this that has a more modern storefront, obviously it's going to be different. So it would be interesting to see more information on maybe what other municipalities have done in a similar situation. Also, didn't the state just adopt a new energy efficiency code? Or is that in process? I've been a little out of touch here.
I think in process, I know in Portland we are fully
Okay.
adopted, but not in Lewiston yet. But coming up.
Okay. All right, anyone else? No? All right, let's move on to the next one. And so the glazing, it's an entrance frequency and recess. That's basically what we've just been discussing, correct?
That was just glazing that we were
Okay,
talking
so
about.
that's just glazing.
So the next one is the entrances.
Okay.
So the design district overlay requests, I believe it's one entrance for every 150 feet?
Be 75.
Might be.
but-
There's a frequency of entrances that are required that we would not be meeting with this design as proposed.
Every 75 feet,
Every 70, thank you.
according to the.
So on building A, we have 4 entrances along Pine Street, and that is because there are 4 separate proposed uses that would be accessed off of that. So there's a community room and then 3 separate retail spaces. So that portion of the site is within that expectation. Building B, which is currently designed to just have a single commercial space in that ground floor, only has 1 entrance. And there are a couple different reasons for that. There's the kind of entrance management and security piece for a tenant to only be controlling 1 entrance. And then we also have a very technical reason for it, which is the grade change on the site. We lose about 10 feet of height from one corner to the next. So on this building, it's like 5 feet over the course. So if we wanted to have a single large retail space in that building, that's about 10,000 square feet, there would need to be internal ramping and stairs, which then significantly reduces the amount of usable space and affects how that space can actually be used. So it makes it far less flexible for an owner who's then trying to lease that space to find a suitable tenant. So the proposed design that we have here kind of strikes a balance there of wanting a larger space and it from an accessibility perspective and maximizing the ability to use that footprint, having that single entrance is most practical.
Okay. All right, anyone have any questions regarding the entrances? Mr. Pine?
What's the intention on this design standard Like, why does it exist, and what was the idea? I mean, I'm assuming it's to provide, sort of permeability to the wall, but are there other reasons?
I'm guessing here, since I wasn't here when this was adopted, but having kind of frequent pedestrian access provides more of a human scale for the building, right? So, and also just the accessibility, so people don't have to walk as far to get into something. I don't know if, David, you have anything you want to add to that?
It's also come up a number of times where we've talked about buildings like Mill 5 and the Bates Mill Complex and how it's difficult to get around those buildings just because of the size and scale of them. And if you had more entrances potentially penetrating into them, whether that building actually provides access entirely through to get to the other side or not. But how do you have more of those, whether it's a storefront or entrance into a residential. We also talked at the time about Country Kitchen and their facility all the way along Lisbon Street, and then they've done a great job landscaping and maintaining it to hide that giant facade. But there's not even any fenestrations or anything, so that's another provision in our design standards. Talks about the blank wall standard and whatnot. So between the blank wall and the entrances, this was an attempt to try to break things up.
Visually,
Yeah.
a little bit, yeah.
So,
Yeah, Alex?
just to follow up on that for the applicant, maximum distance, just ballparking it from entrance to like a corner is about 100 feet?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Najin? Mr. Najin?
So, just one quick question on that, and comment first, which I think some of the downtown businesses, they're smaller storefronts, so I think that's also a conformity thing. The more doors you have, the more it kind of looks like other things.
You want to speak into your microphone?
Yeah, sure.
Please?
So, will there be like some type of emergency entrances or like exits inside? Okay, so it's not, you'll have like one actual entrance, but there'll be other ways to gain egress from the building in case something, okay. That was my question.
Okay, and yes, Ms. Cox?
Oh, Josh kind of touched on it, but I think I was around when we did those design standards, and I think a lot of the conversation was both for the blank wall, the glazing, and for the entrances was to visually break up and ensure conformity of context historically. But one of the conversations we did have about commercial space that I feel like was behind the multiple entrances, which is a little bit of a question that I have for you, is the way in which a 10,000 square foot commercial space could then be split into multiple tenants when there's no longer a demand for a large commercial space, as we've seen that kind of ebb and flow in community. And if and you probably have a slide for it, Catherine. But if the ability to allow future flexibility, 10,000 could be really amazing for this community if it's the right fit and it's the right consistency and we support it as a community. And if not, I don't want a 10,000 square foot vacant commercial spot because of inflexibility.
And so that's where this actually helps us a lot with the flexibility, because if we started to ramp on the inside, we now have two different finished floor elevations, which makes it harder to divide the space in the future. By providing one central entry, we could provide extra doors within that central entry and easily subdivide the interior space, and it's all at one level, so you have more flexibility within that.
It's a really great answer.
Yes. Okay, everybody. Yeah, Lee?
So Shayna asked my question about the larger space, but just to go back, so the smaller store frontage spaces, what is the square footage there?
I believe the ones on the left of the actual retail space themselves, they're each under 1,000, right around 1,000, and then the one on the right is a little bit larger.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pine?
Okay, so I realized maybe I should connect this for the recording. So the reason I was asking about the distance from the corner to the doors, to this point of it being walkable and not too onerous. So, if the standard's 75 feet and the distance we're dealing with here is 100 feet, it's really not too far off. I was wondering if you have a rendering of what it would be like standing on the sidewalk next to the low section of the sidewalk on Building B, so closest to the courtyard. Are you, like, as a person, is it like, here's the bottom of the window and I get to sort of peer over it? Like, you know, someone peering over a fence, how high are we talking about when you get to that lower elevation? And you know, how are you
Well, you can
interacting
see,
with that wall?
they've got little people, little yellow people.
So,
And
but,
that's a patio?
yeah,
That's a
that's the
patio,
patio,
correct?
and that's lower. So when they get further up, we're probably expecting, like, average person, it's gonna be bottom of the window at about chest height.
You're a little taller, thankfully, because of the way that it slopes up. By the time you're past the vegetated area in front of the raised patio area, it's actually probably a little taller.
And what's the surface treatment gonna be around the windows and below the window? It looks like there's 3 different treatments.
And so right now we have brick as our ground floor material, and then below that will be how we interact with that grade plane, which is yet undecided, but will be treated in a waterproof way.
Got it. Okay, and that's like a brick veneer.
Probably not a brick veneer, but like
Oh,
a stucco
actual.
or like a cast concrete treated in a way.
Sorry, yeah.
No, you're-
When I heard brick, I was like, okay, got it.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, let's move on to blank walls.
One other thing I wanted to note here is there's a part 2 to this entrances piece, which is that we're proposing a slightly larger recessed entrance than is recommended. I guess.
Required.
The overlay sets a maximum. It says between X and Y, and we are
Okay.
exceeding Y for a size of, on this side. We've got a larger recessed entrance, in case anyone has concerns. about
Okay.
it.
All right, blank walls.
All right. So the standards establish a maximum blank wall of 15 feet. And we are currently meeting that in all locations except for this specific condition on the sides of the building. So this is building A facing Park and building B facing Bates. So these sections here are 16 and a half feet spanning between those windows. And the reason for that is the location, if you can follow along here. So this is that same location, which is a bathroom. So we are not proposing windows in bathrooms.
Really? You don't want people to give shows or something?
Well, not with this project.
Maybe next time.
So we are requesting, I think, an increase to 17 feet.
Yeah. So it's
As-
an increase of 2 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Anyone have any questions, comments? I think that's probably a very good idea. Yes, Alex?
Is there any chance for a decorative element to be in that space, either when the building's built or in the future? Is that, I don't know how, you know, art or sort of, you know, non-window decoration is being incorporated in, especially how it's trying to reference some of the older buildings in town that have that.
Yeah, well, and that's a great question, because that's one of the things that we have as kind of an additional option for the treatment of a variety of the different spaces on this building. So we mentioned the Juliet balconies, which right now we're expecting will be a railing sort of system, a pretty standard system. But there's also an opportunity, budget allowing, that we could do a textured panel of some kind or a decorative panel there. And that would be an option for us to bring into some of these other places as a surface treatment.
That would be very
Yeah.
very great if you guys could do that. That would be super. Yep, Mr. Najim?
Just a quick question on this. So those are going to be bathrooms, and I take it that the venting is actually going to be internal then? Is that going to be the case? So like the bathroom vents are at?
Right. it's not-
Correct, yeah.
That's not the
Well,
decoration.
Well, no, because I was thinking, you know, like. just
a big vent, a big.
Humidity, right?
Yeah,
Humidity.
Okay.
Hide it. Yeah, okay.
Very interesting vent.
Yeah, right, that might be interesting. Ms. Smith?
Just a question about the Juliet balconies. Are those actually balconies, or are they just sort of like gates, like railings in front of sliding windows?
It's just a rail in front of a sliding door, but it gives you the ability to feel like you're outside when you're inside, and gets a lot of eyes onto the park too, and visibility and openness.
Yeah,
Great.
a little more air in the apartment. Okay.
I was hoping we
anything?
could back up to the door opening, that wider width.
Yeah.
In terms, just wanted to look at it really quick. In terms of how that's going to feel as a space, like, is there any thought about using that space for like shopping carts, or like, does it have a practical space reasoning to it, or is it just sort of, here's the opening?
We're envisioning it as cafe seating similar to the raised platform as well. So it gives you a protected overhang, and so you can sit out there when it's, drizzling or raining or not that nice of a day as well. So 2 options for outdoor seating.
Okay, great. Okay,
Anytime in June or July in Maine.
right. Yeah, August maybe. Okay, right-of-way plantings.
So as you can see, we are proposing street trees along Pine Street, and the red line is approximately the property line, so those trees would be over the property line, would be on city property. Yep.
Okay, anybody else have any comments on street trees and?
I just have a comment, Lucy.
Sure, Lee.
So, and tell me if you'd rather discuss this later on, but if I recall correctly, that far end of Pine recently went down to 1 lane. So it was 2 lanes at the stoplight, and it's now 1 lane. And it can be a little bit of a blinding corner on the left-hand side, even when trying to go straight. So I just, thinking about whatever vegetation is there, or the actual corner of the structure, just visibility, I imagine this will increase traffic, right? And so already, even if there's not a lot of traffic, it's just the visibility there can be a little challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, don't put short bushes that are in, yeah.
Correct, I'm thinking about that one?
Well, there's a light, there's a light
They
there.
talked about the offset between the 2 buildings.
There's a light,
basically,
so
there's-
it should,
The buildings aren't in alignment. and-
Yeah.
And they will be now, I think.
Got it.
And
Right.
with the pitch as well.
Clean it up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hopefully nobody's driving out of the building.
okay. All right, so the next one is amenity space.
So the recently revised language within the ordinances require 50 square feet on site of amenity space per dwelling unit. So we have 104 dwelling units, 50 square feet, that's 52,000 square feet of amenity space, which we are not quite meeting. In green, you can see the kind of unprogrammed green space, and then the lighter green is the space that is intended or would be more likely to have a direct tie to the commercial use. Within the ordinances, there is an allowance that if you are within a reasonable distance of existing public space, green space, then a waiver would be appropriate, and we are obviously right across the street from Kennedy Park. And one of the goals of this project is to increase use of the park and all that comes along with that for safety, perception of safety. So we think that it would be appropriate for that to be waived in favor of encouraging park use.
Okay. Anyone have any comments? Mr. Pine?
Quick. If you give this presentation again, it would be great to have the light green box in the little vestibule area we were just talking about to highlight that it's activated space.
Okay. All right. Then last but not least, underground encroachments.
So this is a more technical request that, as Shelley noted, would not be granted by this body. It would most likely be the city council that would grant permission for this. But because of the location of the building and the proximity to the property line, which is a goal for new development within the Centerville zone, so you're activating that street and you don't have those significant building setbacks, we would have an encroachment underground of the footings for the buildings that would go past the property line by what, like 16, 18 inches?
Yeah, up to a couple feet.
Right, okay. Yeah, Mr. Nugent?
In response to that, the proposal from Acorn was that the development would be responsible for upgrades all the way to the middle of the street, correct? Was that part of what you discussed?
That is correct. So I'm not sure that they're quite related, but that is correct.
I'm just thinking about like kind of like a quid pro quo in the fact that like you're actually doing city labor.
Speak up, because you're, this is being
I was thinking about it as like a quid pro quo because you're actually doing city labor. Ultimately, you're actually only responsible to the edge of your property line. So,
Gotcha.
just want to make that point.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions? Ms. Cox?
I have a question, and it's about amenity space, so I'm sorry to go backwards. And I appreciate our speed tonight, so don't get me wrong. So I have a question for you that based on the language that we offer in the design district overlay around amenity areas, you wouldn't have brought this up, and so I want to ask the question to hear your response, first of all. But our amenities areas, as described, are very specifically outdoor and recreation. You have mentioned amenities that will be on-site and are not outdoors at previous different, a mailroom, a community indoor space. How much space are you providing inside that are amenities? And when might it be appropriate for us, as we look at things we're learning about the design district, to consider the blend of outdoor and indoor amenities? Because when I visit friends in other metropolitan areas, like, real metropolitan areas, the big ones, most of the housing developments come with amenities that are indoor as well as outdoor, whether that's an indoor pool or community space or shared commission, all the things, right? And so based on the way that we framed this, you wouldn't have had a reason or cause to claim additional amenities that are interior. Are there? Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, so each of the buildings does have residential lobby space, so an entrance and circulation, indoor mailroom. We have bike storage in both buildings for residents. And then most significantly, there's a community room located in Building A that would be for the benefit of residents in both buildings. And do you have the square footage on that?
I don't.
I think it's like 1,600
Yeah,
square
I think in
feet.
total, it would be around 4,000 square feet on the ground level of interior amenity space.
Thanks.
Okay.
I don't know, Shelley, if that's something we can make a note of as we discuss changes in the future to the district. I think we should continue to require outdoor recreation space, don't get me wrong, but I think acknowledging that amenities aren't only outdoors.
Yeah, staff agrees with you that it would make sense to allow indoor, like fitness and other.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we know this language does not. Must
It-
be
it-
outside.
Nope, it does not appear to include indoor spaces, so
Okay.
that would be a good change.
To be considered when we reconsider them. Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll open it up to the public at this time. And if you wish to speak for or against this project, would you please step to the podium, give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to speak for or against. So if anyone wishes to say something, going once, going twice, I will close it to the public at this time and bring it back to the board for further discussion or a motion. Mr. Marcotte?
Are we going to deal with the?
Yeah, you have to do the
waivers
waiver first, and then the other
There'll be
one.
more discussion later with the next one? I just want to make sure I don't lose an opportunity.
No, we can have a discussion on the second motion.
Before we go to the second motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm ready on
Okay, well, in that case, if you're ready, you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I don't have to though, but I'm happy to.
Somebody
Sure.
make the motion, please.
I would like to make a motion that the application submitted by Choice Dewitt LP on behalf of Lewiston-Auburn Area Housing Development Corporation to construct apartments at 4060 Pine Street meets all of the criteria contained in Article 11, Section 24.5H waiver requests and Article 13, Section 8.1A, and that the waiver request be granted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Najin, any further discussion from the members of the board? In that case, I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree?
Yes.
Joshua Najin?
Yes.
Michael Marcotte?
Yes.
Shanna Cox?
Yes.
Amy Smith?
Yes.
Lee Albert?
Yes.
Lucy Bisson? Yes. Okay. Then, Mr. Marcotte, did you have discussion that you wanted prior to making the second motion?
Yeah, I didn't know if there was another round of
Not really, they've explained everything, I think, and,
Maybe during one of the waivers, I could have brought this up. I was just not curious. Now, with the removal of both buildings, particularly the one on the corner of Pine and Bates, is there going to be more distance of sight for drivers going up Pine Street at that corner?
well, I think that's what Lee was talking about when she talked about the trees and stuff too, correct? Yeah, so she mentioned that then.
I didn't catch that.
Okay.
So is there going to be more, same or less?
You're talking at the intersection of Park and Pine where you...
No,
No.
Bates and Pine.
Bates and
Bates and
Pine.
Pine.
So at your highest elevation, if you're stopped at that street light, how is your visibility? Left to right?
Going left, yeah.
Left, yeah.
Because right now, it's very difficult. That building is like right up against the street. There's
And
not-
I believe that this one's going to be right up against the street as well, correct?
It is set back a few feet. I'd be interested to see where kind of those two lines fall. We have not analyzed that particular site distance. We'd be happy to provide that site triangle, the existing versus the proposed. The other thing I would mention is, Pine Street is getting a bit of a rehab. I mean, the whole alignment of the street is actually coming down the page. In coordination with DPW. So you may recall like those diagonal parking spaces that are there, like those are going away. That's going to traditional parallel parking. So there is really kind of a revitalization of the street itself. And I have to imagine that DPW has taken that intersection into account as you get to that stop sign. But again, happy to look at that and show the proposed footprint versus the existing.
Yeah, because it's hard to visualize exactly where the property lines were, where the building lines currently to what it will be. Pine Street's still going to be 2 lanes, even though it's one way, correct?
And one thing that's worth noting is that the current property line actually is in the middle of the sidewalk that's existing. So even though the buildings will still have a similar relationship to the property line, their relationship to the edge of the sidewalk will increase. So I think the sidewalk, right, I don't have the survey in front of me, but I think the existing sidewalk is like 5-ish feet wide. 5 or 6, and this sidewalk will be wider than that, especially at those bump outs. So there will be a greater ability to see around the corner of the building
Well,
because
that
the
was my
distance between the
concern.
car and that 60 Pine would increase.
Because if you're traveling from City Hall out, going straight's not a problem. but
Right,
taking
you
that
cannot, right, you cannot see
left-hand
around that
turn, you
building
can't
right
see.
now, yeah.
And seeing where that's a 2-way,
Right.
you got something coming at you.
Yeah.
If it was 1-way, wouldn't make too much of a
Right.
difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and just to piggyback off Catherine's comment, I mean that whole curb extension at the corner there, that just entirely doesn't exist today. And I am looking at the survey here. The existing building is dead nuts on the property line, and we have a 5-foot setback at that corner in the proposed condition.
Oh,
So
okay.
we are certainly improving.
So
Right.
there's 5 extra feet.
Right,
There
Plus
is.
the bump out.
right.
Plus the
Fantastic,
bump out, right.
fantastic.
Plus the fact that if you're in the vehicle, you're further away from the sidewalk than you would be now.
Right,
And that would help with the line of sight.
okay.
Yep.
Mr. Pine?
I was just going to say that we should summarize, because that was a pretty big conversation there. So basically, it sounds like the center line of Pine Street is moving further away from the building, that there is more distance between the street and the building. And I believe the plans also say that we're reducing it to 1 lane. So again, that's increasing more distance from the building. So the concerns around visibility should be
Yeah, should be,
taken care of.
yeah, they should be, Okay, any other questions or comments? And then, in that case, I would entertain a motion. Excuse me.
I'd like to make a motion that the application submitted by Dewitt LP on behalf of Lewiston-Auburn Area Housing Development Corporation to construct apartments at 4060 Pine Street, meets all of the necessary criteria contained in the zoning and land use code, including but not limited to Article 13, Section 4, approval criteria, and Section 5, coordination with state subdivision law, and that development and subdivision approval be granted with the following conditions. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, proof of financial capacity be provided. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall provide a stormwater maintenance plan and shall file a stormwater maintenance guarantee letter with the Registry of Deeds. Prior to signing the final plans, the applicant will correct the landscape plan to address the conflict between the electrical vault and proposed trees, and will revise the dumpster screening if necessary to ensure proper screening without the previously proposed trees. Prior to signing the final plans, comments from Public Works will be addressed to their satisfaction. Public Works satisfaction. Prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant's engineer shall certify that all improvements have been completed in accordance with the approved plans, including but not limited to utilities, pavements and plantings, and building exterior materials. And prior to the start of construction, the applicant will address with the city any encroachments and get the necessary approvals for these.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Roger, any further discussion? Then I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree.
Yes.
Joshua Najin.
Yes.
Michael Marcotte.
Yes.
Shanna Cox.
Yes.
Amy Smith.
Yes.
Lee Albert.
Yes.
Lucy Bisson. Yes. All right.
Thanks.
Yes.
Great job.
Thank you.
Send
Yes.
along your glazing research.
Yeah,
Please and
absolutely.
thanks.
Absolutely.
And we hope we'll see you on the 24th.
Oh,
Yeah.
For the, 2 PM.
I'm planning on it. I got it on my calendar, if I look at the calendar. Okay. All right. Our next public hearing is a petition submitted by MRE LLC and SBMRE LLC for the planning board to send a recommendation to the city council for a contract zone amendment for the former Promenade Mall property, including 89 Vine Street, 855 Lisbon Street, and 857 Lisbon Street, to clarify and amend space and bulk requirements and allowed uses. And Shelley, oh, David, I'm sorry. Mr. Hediger.
I'm excited to find out if you've named the street yet.
It was named after me, wasn't it?
Yeah, wrong Dave, wrong Dave, wrong Dave. They really have to throw a last initial on there to differentiate.
Sure.
Okay, so, bear with me here, folks. This is-
It was very complicated. I mean, I read this, and the history of this is like unreal.
And I can't believe you have to go through it every time you bring something forward. Who
And
was
I can't
here in
imagine why you want to
1996?
change it and update it now so that you don't have to go through all the,
Other than the applicant, who was here in 1996? Dave Hediger, did you?
Were you here
around
in 96?
No.
Okay,
No.
I didn't think so.
Okay, so,
Lincoln?
great, so those of you who realize
Link
this
might
is
have been.
confusing,
No.
so.
No, he's saying no.
MRE and SBMRE LLC, which the entities of Dave Gendron, have submitted a petition to the planning board for recommendation to the city council for a contract zone to amend the former Promenade Mall located at 855 Lisbon Street, 857 Lisbon Street, 89 Vine Street, for the purposes of clarifying and amending the space and bulk requirements. This consists of the Promenade Mall, advanced auto parts,
Dollar General.
Dollar General, excuse me, Tim Hortons, what's going to become Starbucks. And quite frankly, part of the confusion is I just listed off 3 addresses, but in 1996, there was one address out there of 855 Lisbon Street. And it wasn't clear what is now 855 Lisbon Street in 1996 with all these other addresses, in addition to the exhibit that referenced 855 in 1996. What was the boundaries at that point? And part of this came to our attention as a result of the recent subdivision that you folks approved for this, where we split it up into a number of lots out there. And it kind of dawned on us that we're not even sure what we're referencing anymore out there. So over the years, council has made amendments to the code which have resulted in new uses that weren't initially contemplated or allowed on the property back in 1996. Determining what is allowed requires reviewing 27 years of council amendments to the code. The existing rezoning added additional conditions to make the ordinance unclear regarding whether warehousing is allowed on the property. In addition, the existing conditional zoning agreement lacks specific space and bulk standards. So again, we're trying to go back to 1996 and figure out what the standards were at that time. And we're not always successful trying to give that information to either property owners or interested clients. The proposed change will clarify what uses are allowed at the property. Uses would be limited to those uses which are allowed in the community business district, which is the underlying district out there, as the council may amend in the future, in addition to wholesale sales, warehousing, distribution, self-storage facilities, and light industrial uses. The proposed change would also clarify the space and bulk requirements that apply to the providing clear guidelines for future development and enforcement. Space and bulk standards allowed on the property shall be limited to those standards that the code permits in the CB district, again, what's the underlying district out there today, and as amended going forward. So every time you folks or the city council amend something, we don't have to necessarily change this contract zone. So basically, it's a community business zone out there, with the exception of adding 3 uses out there that already exist: the wholesale sales, warehousing and distribution, and light industrial uses. What you do have before you today is something that staff is working with the applicant on, is to further refine that. And if you look at the very first page of this, and I'll let Mike Gatto go into this a little more detail as well, but the zoning map paragraph, I believe, is where the details have changed of significance in this. And basically, it's going to limit it to just 855 Lisbon Street and what is now 77 Essex Street. So you folks approved a subdivision amendment. The Promenade Mall itself, where the building Staples was, Flagship and everything, that is now 77 Essex Street. That will be the only portion of this entire property which was 855. It'll just be that back portion now. That'll be subject to the contract zone. So instead of having all of the property rezoned, and this is a discussion that we've been having Thursday, Friday, and today, how to clean this up, because at the end of the day, and I'll let them speak to it more, the contract zone isn't really necessary for the whole property as it was asked for back in 1996. So we can eliminate a lot of confusion, get a better graphic in there, define exactly what lot it is that we're looking to have these uses on. And at the same time, it'll go back to the underlying zoning district, which actually allows more uses, which is more consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Okay. So basically, the front part is going to just be CB,
Correct.
as it normally would be.
Yep.
And then just the 77 Essex, which was the Promenade Mall, the big, huge building, is going to be the one that we're going to be doing the contract zone on right now.
Right, and I can plug the laptop back in and Mike can go through it, but if you turn to the very last page of the additional correspondence we gave you folks tonight, that's basically the subdivision plan that's showing the hatched areas. So imagine, and Mike has more details if the board's interested, but what was lot 1 on here, lot 2, a portion of what's labeled 841 Lisbon Street, what's labeled 871 Lisbon Street, all of that was part of that initial 855 Lisbon Street from 1996. It doesn't need to be. The graphics were confusing. This is what would be the new exhibit as part of that contract zone to show exactly what is going to be subject to those additional uses, with the rest of it going to CB.
Okay. All right. Anybody have questions for staff? Or do we want to have the applicant give us a presentation first?
Yeah, I'm fine with either.
Mr. Gatto, if you would like to come up, and that way if anyone has any questions.
I'm just noting Exhibit A did name it Dave's Way. Thanks. I can rest tonight.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any other comments to?
I told David earlier today that, of all the staff reports I've seen in many years, I really like this one. He took all the words out of my mouth. He did a real good job in the presentation, the reasons why we're getting into this. I'll believe when I started looking at this for Mr. Genren. And by the way, Dave Genren and Steve Harris are behind me, in case you have questions for them. When I started looking at this, it was a couple days before going on vacation, and I said, this is simple. I took out what we did on South Avenue and East Avenue. I wrote the document, I sent it to Sean and Dave, and copies, I don't think I sent copies to the city. Said, here we go, let's make this happen. When I came back and read what had happened, it was like, I think Shelley said today I can't go on vacation again. Dave said the same thing, but he didn't bug me while I was on vacation. So when I came back, I looked at what the changes and the problems with the mapping and figured out those kind of things. And last Friday, had a long conversation with David, and I said, it seems as though if we don't just eliminate the 96 thing and get done with it,
Yeah.
and then just do the back property with the uses that we want in that back property, then we would, it would make it a lot simpler. So hopefully, the paragraph, the first paragraph that you see in the new contract, and this map
Right.
will make it much cleaner. And one of the other things we discovered is that since we did the subdivision, this was a rezoning for 855 Lisbon Street. There will be no 855 Lisbon Street after they renumber these lots.
Right.
If you look at the lot on the map, they're labeled for Dave's Way, 3 addresses on Dave Way, two addresses on Lisbon Street, and the other address is on Essex Street. So it just made sense to just eliminate it, and that was a thing, I don't know, 1:30, 2:30 this afternoon, when we couldn't get communication with City Hall. We were able to have a phone conversation, and we got this thing done. I think it'll be better for the city and better for us.
I think
It's gonna clarify a mess.
Yeah, I
So.
think it was a mess before, I mean, because of all the years of making changes and stuff, and I think this will clarify everything, make it a lot easier. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Mr. Gatto? Ms. Cox?
Yep, it could be you, or Dave might take it too, so feel free. So fundamentally, there is no change to the building that's gonna be 77 Essex Street. Like, with this action, should we take it today, then you're gonna have the same abilities, uses, yada, yada, yada. And you're losing some of the contract rezoned by moving from what you had to the CB.
We're
by cha-
reducing the area that we could go out and build warehousing and other things because we really want to comply with the comprehensive plan and have mixed-use development.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to make that, and that's why we started going through the subdivision. And then you try to ask David, okay, so what uses can we allow on Lot 2 that's the vacant lot that's left?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, we gotta go through 27 years of ordinances
yeah.
and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And so with the answers that you've gotten and with the current CB uses as they're named, you're good with Lot 2
Yes,
being CB?
yep.
Great.
Yeah, no, we're good with Lot 2 being CB, and we've modified the contract zoning in the back to be CB with some limitations.
Right.
So we're really trying to say, it's CB setbacks, it's CB space and bulk, it's C,
Okay.
everything except for those additional uses.
Right.
I would just add for staff, I appreciated the for future thinking note. In our larger exercise of looking at zones and.
It's easy to think that once you start looking at the table and all the changes that we've made over the last several years, there's not much of a difference between the two districts. So, add it to the basket or whatever. It's something we should probably think about at some point.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Okay, any other further questions from the board? I will open it up to the public. If anyone wishes to speak in favor or against, please step to the podium, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to make comments. Seeing none, I will close it, bring it back to the board. Any further discussion, or I will entertain a motion?
I will gladly make one.
That sounds like a plan.
I'd like to make a motion pursuant to Article 7, Section 4, and Article 17, Section 5 of the Zoning and Land Use Code to send a favorable recommendation to the City Council for the request by MRE LLC and SBMRE LLC for a contract zone amendment for the former Promenade Mall property located at 855 Lisbon Street, 857 Lisbon Street, and 89 Vine Street from the Highway Business Zoning District with conditions to the Community Business Zoning District with conditions.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay, any further discussion? I'll call the roll. Roger Dupree.
Yes.
Joshua Najin.
Yes.
Michael Marcotte.
Yes.
Shanna Cox.
Yes.
Excuse me. Amy Smith.
Yes?
Lee Albert.
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. All right.
You'll be back?
Oh, I'm sure.
just
I'm
to-
sure you will.
Bring them on. Keep bringing them.
Absolutely.
Hold
Bring 'em
on, Mike. Lucy, just a point of clarification.
Certainly.
Given the changes that were made this evening,
Yes.
I'm wondering if,
Don't mess this up, Dave.
We'll make another motion.
I think you folks might want to just to amend that slightly, because the motion we had drafted initially was all three of those properties to go to the community business district with conditions, and that's not actually what the outcome was now. It would
Okay.
only be what is now 77 Essex Street with those conditions. So your other properties there, of 855 doesn't exist anymore, right?
Right.
857 still exists, 89 is now something
So the
else.
motion should read, instead of all these addresses, it
Just
should read just
77
77 Essex.
Yeah, I think what we would say, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking that while you guys were reading.
I wondered as I was reading
Well-
it, why we were naming all those.
Give me a second.
Because our motion should theoretically convey the highway business zoning district conditions to 77 Essex Street. And by not including the other properties, they default to the
Exactly.
And
exactly.
revert
And
the
revert
others.
to CV too.
Exactly.
Want me to take another stab at that?
Sure, let's,
Do we need to strike the prior motion?
strike the prior motion. I don't know if we have to make a motion to strike the motion, but,
If it's understood by everyone, we'll be all set.
okay, it is
You're a
understood by everyone
parliamentarian,
that we're gonna redo the motion?
Say, motion to reconsider.
Second.
Okay, and, all right, Roger, motion to reconsider.
Yes.
Joshua,
Yes.
Michael, Shanna,
Yep,
Amy,
Yes?
Lee,
Yes.
Lucy, yes. Okay, so reconsider.
Let's do that.
Let's redo this.
all right. It's like our encore performance, gentlemen. I would like to make a motion pursuant to Article 7, Section 4, and Article 17, Section 5 of the Zoning and Land Use Code to send a favorable recommendation to the City Council for the request by MRE LLC and SBMRE LLC for a contract zone amendment for the former Promenade Mall property located,
At 77 Essex.
pause on the, it was 855 Lisbon Street and will be known as, thank you.
855, now known as.
I'm going with this. For the former Promenade Mall property that was located at 855 Lisbon Street and will be further known as 77 Essex Street from the Highway Business Zoning District with conditions to the Community Business Zoning District with conditions.
And,
Do I have a second?
and revert the other properties.
We don't have to, that
We
happens
don't have to,
naturally
'cause
by
that
only
automatically
including
does.
77
Yeah.
Essex.
We only
I
named
mean,
that one.
it's understood that that happens, but that's.
Okay,
Point well
so
taken.
Roger is the second. Any further discussion? Roger Dupree.
Yes.
Joshua Najin.
Yes.
Michael Marcotte.
Yes.
Shanna Cox.
Yes.
Amy Smith.
Yes.
Lee Albert.
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. Okay, now you guys can leave.
Run.
See you next time. Because we really like to see you guys come. We really do.
So anybody that's here, that's going to the council next Tuesday.
Next
First,
Tuesday,
yeah.
not tomorrow.
Correct.
Okay. All righty.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your new street.
Yes. Looking forward to seeing this.
Yeah, right.
Sure it is.
Don't be saying that. That's exactly what we don't want to hear.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. All right, public hearing for a recommendation from the planning board to the city council for amendments to the zoning and land use code, including Article 2, definitions of restaurants and drinking places. All right. And Shelley.
So, a few months ago, staff asked the planning board to initiate a change to restaurants and related definitions, which you did. We are here this evening probably for more of a workshop type discussion. Although if we get to a place where you're ready to make a recommendation to council, that's fine. Staff has met internally, economic development and planning and code enforcement and the clerk's office to look at these definitions. This all started because of a specific restaurant that was looking to do some things they couldn't do under our current ordinance, but economic development has had other businesses in the past also have issues with these definitions and feel restricted in what they could do. So it is a broader issue and has been kind of a long time coming, I think, for us to open up this part of the ordinance and discuss it. So some of the issues that came up that this is seeking to address are, right now, we have a restriction that a restaurant can't, there's a couple of issues. Restaurants can't be open, they can't close the kitchen essentially if they're a restaurant, right? So for some restaurant classes, that's a state requirement. They have to be serving some kind of food. The way we have this written, though, we require full course meals the entire time they're open. So it does limit the ability to close down the kitchen or limit the kitchen if they want to have like a band in the evening and stay open later than normal that they might for the restaurant. So the intention here is to allow them some time towards closing to close or significantly scale back the kitchen so that they could reduce kitchen staffing but still be open and have a special event or have bands or other entertainment. We also prohibit restaurants from having a special amusement permit. And with this proposal, we're allowing that as an accessory use to the restaurant use. So that a restaurant could potentially serve alcohol and have dancing if they wanted to, which right now that essentially kicks them into the category of a drinking establishment, not a restaurant, if they're going to do that. We also noticed as we took a close look at this definition that we really require them to serve food on premise, not be a takeout only establishment. Certainly there's restaurants that are doing that now post-pandemic, and other restaurants that's just their business model. So it made sense to correct that as we looked at that. And finally, there was an issue where we also prohibit them from restricting age in a restaurant. So if they do want to be open late in the evening and they are serving alcohol and they do have a band, they can't restrict it to, no minors, for example. And that was something we were hearing, that restaurants wanted the flexibility to be able to do that. If they were going to have a band, they didn't want to be trying to police who was coming in the restaurant if they're focusing more on drink service than on food service. Those are the issues that we were told. As we looked at this as well, we looked at the neighborhood restaurant definition that this board and we worked on a few months back. And our thought process, which we'd love your feedback on, was that the intent for that neighborhood restaurant, which as a reminder is only in 2 zoning districts, the neighborhood conservation B and the neighborhood business, formerly the office residential zoning district. The intent was really not to allow those types of establishments to be acting like a nightclub. So we thought if the restaurant definition starts to allow special amusement permits as an accessory use, that maybe the neighborhood restaurant wouldn't want to allow that. So it's kind of open for discussion. Since drafting this and putting this forward to you, we had reached out to Maine Municipal Association for some legal guidance. We were questioning a little bit the restrictions of age that are in our definition. you know, whether there's some legality issues with that, whether we should be, you know, suggesting, I suppose, by our ordinance that it's okay for a restaurant to restrict age. So we did get some guidance back, that there are some provisions. It seems like if they are going to be serving alcohol, that they can certainly do that. One of the suggestions was that perhaps the special amusement permit would be a more appropriate area to allow that age restriction. So if they're doing the activities in the special amusement permit and they have it, that at those times they could restrict the age, and maybe our restaurant definition is silent on age. So that's one possibility that this could go in, which staff thinks might be a good direction, and MMA was suggesting might be an option as well. I'm going to stop talking at this point, allow, if David wants to jump in with anything, to allow him to add anything, and then to really just open this up for conversation. I know David had invited, I think, a couple of restaurants to come if they wanted to the public hearing. I'm not seeing anybody other than Jeff, so I don't think we'll have that input tonight, but we, as staff, can kind of continue to try to get a little bit more input on that.
Yeah, if Misty was still here, she would tell you that when she's talking to businesses that are interested in coming downtown, one of the things that they're concerned about is meeting this provision about serving food at all times. And if they don't, are we gonna go in there and, you know?
Shut them down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, probably not unless it's brought to our attention that we're gonna know about it. But people want to follow the rules, they don't want any issues here type thing.
Right.
So the other example I usually give is Da Vinci's is clearly a restaurant. Nobody thinks of that place as a drinking establishment. Well, maybe somebody does. But it's a restaurant. People think it's a restaurant. If they got a special amusement permit for dancing or entertainment for some reason, regardless that we all think it's a restaurant, it automatically becomes a drinking place given the way that this is written. And that was, I think, somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction many years ago when we had issues with a bunch of clubs on Park Street down here. And the council, actually, I think this is decades worth. I mean, some of you folk, it even predates me when, you know, we had the red light district down here, we had all these bars and clubs, and we had that setback requirement that you folks actually helped eliminate, where you couldn't have more than 2 bars next to each other. But that was a requirement to, you know, thin out the number of establishments we had down there. I think some of this language was put in place to be restrictive because of problematic establishments we had down here on Park Street. And maybe it's a sentiment of the board or the council or just business practices in general, but is there a better way for us to do this to provide some flexibility? And we think there might be. We're not totally sure what it is necessarily yet, but we wanted to at least get this discussion going with you folks.
I think personally that it was much too restrictive before. I mean, if you go, you know, from one to the other automatically, and I think the special entertainment permit license, whatever it's called, would be a way to do the restricting for the age, as well as being able to close the kitchen. And you know, and I know that when we were discussing like rezoning the property off of Old Lisbon Road, the Wiseman Farm, and that there was going to be the restaurant, and I'm sure that they don't want a drinking establishment in that neighborhood if it ever develops. So I think that I think that the special entertainment permit would be a way to get around it. That's my opinion. Anyone else? Yes, Josh.
If I can, for just one thing, for
Yeah.
food for thought with that too, the special amusement permit, if people aren't aware, it's tied to alcohol. So, I don't know, you're Burger King, you want to have live entertainment, you want to have dancing, you don't need a special amusement permit. Burger King starts serving beer there and they want to have entertainment, it's per state law that you actually need to have a special amusement permit. So just, we have that requirement locally to administer those licenses on behalf of the state, but just want that clear for purposes of discussion.
Okay.
So
Yes,
I have
Josh.
one question for staff, and then I have a comment. And so if you're an establishment that, let's say you do have a liquor license, but you decide that you're going to not serve liquor while having, like, let's say you have a band come, right? Can you then be a BYOB establishment or no? I'm thinking about like specifically like Pure Thai, for instance, before they get their liquor license, they allowed people to bring in alcohol and they were BYOB. And the reason why I'm asking this is because I'm thinking about specifically neighborhood businesses, neighborhood restaurants being somewhat of third places, functioning as like possibly like cafes and the ability to create value for the neighborhood without encroaching on, like you don't obviously want a band playing outdoors past like the time that the noise ordinance is going, and you don't want a whole bunch of people getting all sloshy drunk. So, but also you do want to be able to support arts and music, so I'm just wondering, like, do you hear what I'm saying on that question?
I don't know that I have all the answers to that, because there's a different requirement tied to BYOBs.
Okay.
But if I understood correctly, I'm a licensed establishment already, is what your question is. I already serve alcohol. I'm not gonna serve alcohol, but I want the ability for people to do BYOB instead.
Or vice versa. Let's say you don't have a liquor license at all and you want to allow BYOB.
I'm not sure, Josh. I'm
Okay.
not sure how that works. A lot of this is driven by state liquor laws.
Okay.
And Kelly or Kathy might have a better handle of that. I actually had a conversation with the state licensing division of alcohol.
Bablo.
Bablo.
Love Bablo.
Bablo, it sounds like a hobbit or something like
Yep.
that. And, but they are, Larry Sanborn is familiar with Lewiston. He knows the establishments, and talking to him, and he was basically saying it's really up to these establishments how they want to operate, and then just applying for the license. So it's kind of like the practice, like if they want to limit minors, that's a business decision on their part, but they may still have to be licensed as a Class A lounge or something like that. So you're the goose and you want to limit minors in there, or you want to let them in. You potentially can do that. It's a business decision on their part. So again, I think our ordinance is really just driven by past practices as to try to make that distinction from a zoning perspective versus what licensing does. We can get some clarification on that though, because I'm not sure.
I think it might be good that we get some clarification on the BYOB and the liquor license thing. That might be, something that we might like to know.
And so my comment is just going to be that when I think about neighborhood restaurants in particular, I do think that there is a value to them being able to acquire a special entertainment permit, but I also think because they are neighborhood businesses, we may want to think about whether or not we say, let's say, the former OR and the NCB, that they could only be issued to a certain time, for instance. In the reasoning behind that, I remember when Bocce's, That's a Wrap, was around the corner for me. It was in a neighborhood where there wasn't really a lot of housing. And so they had bands play on the patio. And it was fantastic because it was within walking distance of my house, right? So I could go out and have a few beers, not have to worry about catching a car home, the whole thing. But also, like, if that establishment was next to my house, I'd want...
You wouldn't want them playing till 1 o'clock in the morning.
I wouldn't want them playing out on the patio till 1, so...
Right. Yeah, Shannon?
As somebody who's had to get a special amusement, so I technically work for a nonprofit who represents businesses who doesn't have a restaurant or a liquor license, and twice a year I get a liquor license, and with that, based on the type of event I'm doing, also have to get a special amusement permit and come in before city council to request it. And so the reason that I offer that is A, there's a clear process both that the neighbor and the business owner could take, and the request for the permit is based on what they're doing. So like there wouldn't need to be a reason to address that in any of the language because the coffee shop on the corner decides to do a once a month Saturday evening whatever. Their special amusement permit would declare the times. It would be clear, it would be public, it would be in the agenda, and the neighbors could come out and say, I'm not okay with 11, but 9 o'clock's all right. And that could be negotiated in this room through the process that already exists. Because I've had to walk through it, just helpful
Right, right.
information.
Yeah, that's good information.
But
Alex?
the language in here is saying that neighborhood restaurants, like what's being proposed is they can't get that permit.
I was just offering thoughts on,
Got it.
I have questions when it's my turn.
Oh,
I'm
just,
waiting.
just to make that clear, just to make that
Yep.
clear.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Amy?
My question is, could they get like a standing special permit? So for example, if Da Vinci's decides they want to do this Thursday, Friday, Saturday forever, they're always going to close the kitchen at 9, and then they're always going to have entertainment till midnight. Like, would they have to reapply every time?
No, I think, and I'm not sure what your experience with Shanna, because I think it's been, I'm thinking like what you've done. is
I do
for, like, a
one-off stuff,
special
but
event.
if you're Fusion Nightclub, which is a restaurant during the day, a restaurant bar, I'm not sure they're licensed during the evening, and they do DJs on any given Friday and Saturday, their licensing with the state gives them a special amusement permit
So,
for like all the times.
right, so Da Vinci's would not have to go to the council every time and say, oh, great,
Right.
we're gonna do this, you know,
Right.
every Saturday. I mean, they're just
Right.
gonna ask for a special amusement permit that allows live entertainment and dancing and whatnot. So that kind of goes to the neighborhood concern, like either you put language in here that maybe it limits hours of operation, or we put it in there thinking, you know, historically it's been dancing that's been the issue, but if the neighborhood restaurant wants to have a small, I don't know if it's, whatever, they're gonna have live entertainment, is that okay? You know, try to lessen the impact, because we did have that discussion about restaurants, you know, they're not likely gonna be open to 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, so
Right.
what does that mean? And we don't have a neighborhood restaurant yet, but we don't want the first one to fail either, because they decide to have live entertainment until 1 in the morning either.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
what do we do with that?
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I mean, we have.
I do.
we-
Can Josh wait until the end?
You know, I can, I'll open it up to the public and I'll close it because unless Jeff, you want to comment, I didn't think so. Okay, so I'll bring it back and let's talk some more. I mean, do we want to proceed and do something with it tonight, or do we want more information?
I don't want to do it tonight. I'd like the opportunity to talk about my questions and the additional information.
Okay, well, I do agree. I'm not crazy about doing it tonight because we brought up a number of questions and we would like to get answers to that before we propose something that we have to change in 6 weeks or a month or, you know.
I'd also like to request that we, you know, really invite some of the owners who want to weigh in on this. 'cause I don't understand
Absolutely.
what it
I
is.
think it would be a good idea to get some actual people who are in the field. Yeah, absolutely. Lee?
Yeah, so a question to
Yeah, go
that.
ahead.
I'm curious how many folks have come forward. I mean, I'm just not wanting to take action. Well, I'll stop there. I think it's good for us to think about diversity of options broadly in terms of being pro-business. So I appreciate that, but I want to make sure it's not like just 2 folks have come forward, but, you know, are we seeing a plethora of inquiries on this front, just to get a sense of how the
Right.
scale of the desire or the concerns?
Yeah, I could ask Misty as well, because she deals with the businesses on the front end maybe a little bit more than our department does. But it's usually the conversation is, these are the standards, and then they decide whether they can meet them or not.
Sure.
The other part of that is maybe the zoning as well. I can't think off the top of my head where we allow drinking establishments. But as an example, Afrotaste, which is where Pedro O'Hara's was, they have live entertainment, they have dancing, they're a restaurant, they're a drinking place. The zoning allows both of those uses, not a problem, get whatever licenses you want, but you may fall into a zoning district. And I'm trying to think if the highway business allows drinking places or not, and I don't know, but I'm thinking.
Oh, I would
either
think
highway
so.
business or
You've
community
got,
business,
you've
one of
got
those
Little
districts.
Joe's and you've got
Right.
all these.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Some of them are probably non-conforming, though. You know,
Oh, that's
Little
true.
Joe's
They've
has
been there forever.
And I want to say Little Joe's is a restaurant.
I think it is. Can I speak to Lee's question?
Sure, and then I have another.
Through a different perspective, like, clearly I'm not at City Hall taking the request, but I can say from existing business owners and the way they navigated the pandemic, during the course of the pandemic, because of some of these restrictions, and some of them are already in a zoning place where it does matter, right? A la Lisbon Street. I heard from a number of businesses in many communities, but Lewiston too, that re-looked at their license, that added items to their menu, that created a late night menu that allowed for extended hours under some of these rules, because you have to, like, Slim Jims and potato chips count, right? But other places added like late night nuggets, for example. And so we saw a bunch of businesses who were already in place with an capital investment in a location, reconsidering what was possible to make things work during the pandemic. And I know I've spoken to probably 4 or 5 business owners who probably aren't ones that are coming forward and talking about setting up shop because they already have a shop. So, I mean, while I would certainly be curious to Lee's question as well, I would say, I think this discussion is one impacting many businesses, not just future and potential development, but also existing ones, for what that's worth.
Thank you. No, that's helpful.
And for what it's worth too, and then I guess I didn't realize this, but even from a state perspective, if you're a Class A lounge, and we don't have many, we have the Blue Goose, and I'm trying to think what the other one might be in town. Just like a bar that you think of. State
Okay, yeah, probably. No, they offer food. They offer food for that purpose.
So they all have to offer food.
Yeah.
So I
5
mean,
items.
It can be a frozen pizza. It can be a Hot Pocket. It can be chips and dip.
Slim Jims.
You know, so that's the extent of the law where you still have to offer food. So that's why Shelley put in here, did you make that reference about, full course meals as defined by Title 28. That's a crazy definition when you read it, because it talks about using utensils and being on a plate, and like, so, you know, it almost seems like an antiquated type of definition, but that's what the state makes a distinction of a full course meal versus just providing food.
Right.
Anything we can do to simplify it, so
Yeah,
Shelley don't have to have
absolutely.
these conversations with businesses would be great.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we need to be more and more business-friendly.
Correct.
And developer-friendly as we can. So I think clarifying language, simplifying language, making it best. So do we need a motion to
I still have
table this?
questions. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
May I have-
All right.
Can we just make sure we all get a chance? Because as we
Yeah.
create the list of things, there's a couple research items I'd like.
Okay, Lee, and then I'll come back to you.
Sure, so then my final question, and I hope people are okay with this. How does this look in Auburn? And I just ask as the patron, fluidly flowing, theoretically, between the two cities at night or during the daytime. So I'm just curious if there's anything we can learn from how their rules are written. That might be helpful to consider.
Right. Shanna?
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Shanna?
Yes, please. Thank you. So a couple of things. I don't know if full and meals still needs to be there or must offer food. And if you're going to reference as defined by something else, can you provide that definition in our materials when you bring it forward? Because what that definition is and how we're trying to be business friendly is going to impact my ability to be like, yeah, that makes sense, or no. Like, is it a must have starch, vegetable, and meat on the plate? Like, I don't know what that definition looks like. So if we're gonna rely on the definition, can you pull it forward?
Yep.
Likewise, I'm just getting some real bad Footloose vibes with our references to dancing throughout, and I'd like to see the definitions as related to dancing, because realistically,
As in ballroom dance?
you
or-
cannot have it right, or you cannot have a band and people take to the dance floor based on a song from their phone, or you can have a really great band and everybody is sitting in their seats and not dancing at all, and I don't think it's about dancing. So whatever the point is of referencing dancing, is it about the raucous crowd outside, or the lateness of the hour, or how much
square footage
fun
of
is
the
being
dance
had?
floor.
But like, what's the point? And if we're referencing dancing in the definition, gonna wanna see that one too, because we reference that in here, and that doesn't make any sense to me, and we're not gonna be the Footloose community, okay? We're not gonna do that. We're not. Like,
Okay.
why dancing?
All right.
And I felt like there was one more definition that,
Okay, look for it, and
Yeah,
Alex
okay.
had a question, and when you find it, let me know.
thanks.
I just wanted to make sure that we break this out and talking about it as a couple different issues, because there's a couple of things going on here, and I think it would be good to make sure that when we address it again in the future, that they're separate. So the first one is the neighborhood restaurant and whether or not they can interface with whatever this sort of entertainment process is going to look like, then to me it sounds like, and this is where having the restaurant show up would be really good, there's sort of this like, well, we want to be able to have entertainment, but there's also, we want to operate on occasion as a bar would and be able to restrict patronage based on age and things like that. And I think those are somewhat separate too, in that, you know, some businesses may not want to restrict age. So yeah, just making sure that we can sort of break this up a little bit more so that when we talk about it, we don't get stuck. I know they're all interrelated, but I think we'll end up swirling a lot. So just a request.
Josh?
So there are a few things I just wanted to throw out. One would be like takeaway and grab and go, super important, I think. And also when I see, like I think about Portland's revitalization in the neighborhoods around Bayside and Back Bay. And one of the things that always comes to mind is Union Bagel, right? So it's a bakery, right? It's a bagel shop, but also it's, you go there and you order food to eat, right? They've got the place that does the banh mi is right down the street as well, and I think it has no seating in it whatsoever. And so like when we think about like looking at what Auburn does, I'm less interested in what Auburn does. I'm very interested in what Portland does, because I look at like Portland pottery, the process in which Silly's became Silly's with a twist. You know, I remember driving to Silly's to see bands play, like, you know, from Manchester. So just wanted to name all those things. And then another thing which isn't addressed in here, and I don't know if it's actually appropriate to put in here, but I do want to mention ghost kitchens. I don't want neighborhood restaurants to become ghost kitchens in NCB, because I think that like the whole point of having a neighborhood restaurant in NCB is to have an amenity for the community. And so I just want to name that.
Okay, sure.
And I think that could also go with the OR as well, or the new zone.
Okay.
Because it should be a benefit for the neighborhood and not just a space.
Right, sure. Shanna, did you find your other item? No. Okay. Okay, so do we need a motion to table this item? Yes. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to table this until you have answers for all of the comments, questions, and concerns that we specified tonight.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. And any questions, comments? Roger, Josh?
You had a comment? No. I was just going to say thank you guys so much for bringing this forward.
Yes, it's great.
And
So,
for working with us on, you know, because I know we're all.
oh, yeah, we've all got a gazillion questions. Roger?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Shanna?
Yep.
Amy?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Lucy? Yes. Okay, so we're tabled this one.
I'll just add too, by all means, if you guys want to be a planner and help us out and you find language or you're online and you're like, you know, I found this great ordinance from Philadelphia that I think we should do.
Okay.
Send it to me and Shelley. I mean,
Sure.
I'm really sorry. It was both dancing and the full meals. It's those two things. You might have captured both. It's
Yeah,
those.
you already
That's
mentioned.
the whole point
Okay,
of the grab and go.
fantastic. Okay,
You can do it in the neighborhood.
other business.
Wait, we got to finish that vote.
No, we did.
We did.
We did. I named everybody.
Fast.
Oh, great. Love this day. Let's keep doing it.
Okay. Other business. A recommendation from the planning board to the city council on the proposed boundary line agreement with the Lewiston-Auburn Water Pollution Control Authority for 535 Lincoln Street for the purpose of clarifying past conflicting deed and survey information. Shelley,
Okay.
you're on.
So we're lucky enough to have Jeff Boley, the city engineer, here this evening, so he'll help staff out when we get in the weeds here. But essentially, there you can see on the figures in the materials that were provided, there are two parcels that abut each other, 535 and 509 Lincoln Street. One is used as a boat launch and is owned by the city. The other is owned by the Lewiston-Auburn
LAPA.
Lewiston-Auburn Water Pollution Control Authority, LAPCA. And they're, as you know, they had come to you for a zoning change, change to zoning language so that they could move forward with their combined sewer overflow tank project. In the course of that project, the consultant was reviewing survey and deed material, and the city was, and it was found that there were some discrepancies going back in time, and that it was unclear. I think tonight's like the night for unclear zoning or deeds, but it was unclear where exactly the property line is. So we were advised by the attorneys working on this and surveyors that the cleanest way to handle this would be for an agreement to be made between LAPCA and the city as to the boundary line between those two parcels.
Okay.
And I'll let Jeff tell you more information on this.
Okay, come on up, Jeff.
Is there much more information needed?
Yeah, is there
Though
really?
we love to hear from you, Jeff.
Yeah, we would, but I mean, does anybody have any further questions
Do
regarding?
both parties agree to the proposal as listed?
Everybody is happy with the change?
The city and the city.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all this, you know, it's instead of having it in this hand, it's gonna be in this hand, right?
Yeah, basically, I kind of
Okay.
representing both sides. I'm on the board of directors of LAPCA also.
Okay.
So,
Oh, so gonna talk from both sides of your mouth? Okay, does anybody have any questions for Jeff? I don't think we really need another formal presentation. Oh,
The only question I would have is there anything that would be negative by approving this at all? Like, do you see anything that is a challenge?
no, I mean, their road has been shown crossing the city parcel since 1971, or, well, whenever this line appeared in the wrong spot that doesn't quite match what the deed says. We couldn't find an easement for the road. No, both sides agree that where the line was originally intended is the
Okay.
best solution for both, and
All right, sounds good. Michael?
Josh just made me think of something. So, the boat launch would be recreation?
will be what?
The boat launch would be considered property that's recreation?
From like a use perspective?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have certain statistics on how much square footage of recreation we have in the municipality for legal reasons?
Not necessarily. We do,
For offsetting conditions and such?
The city retains the boat launch and loses,
if you're talking about like all the things we're dealing with the,
The rec conversion?
yeah, the rec conversion and the park improvements that we made in the
Yeah,
1970s that have since
That-
disappeared.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
I was just curious because, with the current line, you have more square footage. By moving it, you're gonna lose square footage. I didn't think of that until Josh asked
really
if there were
makes a big
any
difference.
negatives.
pretty minimal, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make a big difference to me.
Yeah, I don't care one way or the other. I mean,
I-
if the lawyers are happy, you know,
Two parties agree on the same thing.
on the same thing,
Let it
I
go.
Now
don't,
you're thinking about it though, right? Now you're thinking
I don't think it's an issue.
I think, and chime in, Jeff, if I'm wrong, because Jeff's close to this too, but part of the concern with that rec conversion in this was that the actual loss of those uses. So we had the pool that was down where, next to the Lincoln Street Fire Station in the 1970s.
Oh, yeah.
That disappeared. There were tennis courts somewhere on Franklin Pasture. Those disappeared. Nothing's disappearing here necessarily, and this wasn't necessarily, this part I do know, those were associated with federal funding that was put in place at the time. This was actually done as part of FERC licensing.
Okay.
With Brookfield, or at the time, it was probably Union Water Power or CMP. So this was an amenity associated with that versus federally funded projects that we took money and then we eliminated those uses, and now we're being told we have to reestablish them.
Right.
So-
Yeah, so this has nothing to do with RTP anyways.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
All right, I'll entertain a motion unless somebody has,
I'll make the motion.
sure, go
Make
ahead.
a motion pursuant to Article 7, Section 4H of the Zoning and Land Use Code to send a favorable recommendation to the City Council to enter into a boundary agreement to clarify the boundary between 535 and 509 Lincoln Street, if any specific conditions and/or concerns raised by the planning board.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Roger Dupree,
Yes.
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte, Shanna Cox.
Yep.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
Lee Albert,
Yes.
Lucy Bisson, yes. All righty. Go ahead and sign your life away. Okay. Last item, reading of the motion, make a motion to adopt the minutes of the June 12th meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Okay, any further discussion? Roger Dupree,
Yes.
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte,
Yes.
Shanna Cox.
Yes.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
Lee Albert,
Yes.
and Lucy Bisson, yes. And is there any other business?
Who seconded that motion?
Josh?
No.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And all those in favor? Yay. See ya. Okay, so do we have anything for 2 weeks from now?
At this time, we do not.
Okay.
So
Try to avoid having.
we are hoping that we'll be able to cancel that. We'll send out an email probably in the next week or so to let you know.
Okay.
I would consider it a birthday gift.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be a sunny day.
What?
Water levels.
Yeah? Oh my God, I was like living vicariously through you.
Oh, thank you.
I got a good mama. I got a good mama.
Okay.
One more thing.
I appreciate your.
I highlighted it for you.
What's that?
I appreciate the Portland comment.
I'm thinking about places that are a little more flexible.
What about me and my?
It's just like one of the